named John was sent from God. He came for testimony, to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. And this is the testimony of John. When the Jews of Jerusalem sent priests and Levites to him to ask him, "Who are you?" he admitted and did not deny it, but admitted, "I am not the Christ." So they asked him, "Who are you then? Are you Elijah?" And he said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He answered, "No." And so they said to him, "Who are you, so that we can give an answer to those who sent us? What do you have to say for yourself?" He said, "I am a voice crying out in the desert, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as Isaiah the prophet said." Some Pharisees were also sent. They asked him, "Why then do you baptize if you're not the Christ or Elijah or the prophet?" John answered them, "I baptize with water, but there is one among you whom you do not recognize, the one who is coming after me, whose sandal strap I'm not worthy to untie." This happened in Bethany, across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. Hello and welcome to Closer Walk Catholic Communications. I'm Father Bayer, your host. We're glad that you can join us today. I am not the light. Years ago, I remember, and it was the big days of the drug wars, long before they let people do them on city streets and legalized them. But there was a commercial put out by our Attorney General's office, and it was a commercial of a kitchen. And in the kitchen, it was dark when you entered the kitchen, and when you flipped on the lights, the roaches in the kitchen just all ran and dispersed and ran under the cabinets and ran to hide. And the whole message was, these are the ones who are afraid of the light because what they're doing is illegal, and stop the war on drugs, all that stuff. But it is a pretty good analysis about light and darkness in the world in which we live. I don't know. I've just seen a lot more evil. And I don't use the word evil lightly, okay? 45 years a priest, 70 years old. I haven't used the word evil very lightly at all. To me, evil connotes something that's demonic, definitely not of God, and something that is destructive for mankind and humanity. That's how I use the word evil. I read a quote recently that said, "First, we ignore evil. Then, we tolerate evil. Then, we legalize evil. Then, we promote evil. Then, we celebrate evil. And finally, we persecute anyone who still dares to call it evil." Sounds about right to me. It sounds about right in the world in which we live. 1960, there was a census, as we do every 10 years in this country. And in that census, less than 4% of all children were born out of wedlock. Then 1964, they declared a war on poverty. When they declared that war on poverty, they had all sorts of incentives for people, whether it's food stamps, housing, WIC, all kind of assistance, which is not a bad thing. But if you were married and had a husband, you could not qualify. You could not qualify. You only had to be a single mother. And if you were a single mother, unmarried, you had all sorts of opportunities to get free government assistance, but only if you were unmarried and having children. All right? In the 2020 census, among some populations, it's 74% of the children are born out of wedlock. 48% of all children are born out of wedlock. And then we ask ourselves the question, why are our children so violent these days? We ask ourselves, why are our children so messed up? Why do we have kids on social media encouraging kids that they've been disrespecting? And when they talk about committing suicide, the kids go, yeah, go ahead and do it. The world will be a better place. That's evil. That's evil in our midst. And everybody say, oh, that darn computer and that social media, that's what promotes that. No, it's not. No, it's not. We have dimmed the light of Christ's teachings in the world. We no longer think that the gift of human sexuality is a gift that should be shared in the context of a loving married relationship between a man and a woman. We no longer believe that. We believe that it ought to be a recreational activity. And the whole if it feels good, do it mentality seems to be very prevalent. And then there was a young lady who was a law school student, testifies on Capitol Hill and says her contraceptive devices cost her about $3,000 a month. My God, how does she have time to go to class? But anyway, that idea of we need to protect people, we need to guard them from their mistakes, we need to have a false bottom that regardless of what you do, we're going to take care of it and make it right and throw money at it. And, if that's what you want to do, who are we to tell you otherwise? But we're the ones who should pay for it. How many parents, tell their kids, well, I don't care what you do, but here's a credit card. If you do, that's why your kids are screwed up, okay? If you do. And it's that darkness that has entered the world in which we live. It's that darkness that says, you can give 11-year-olds condoms in our public school system, but you can't give them an aspirin. You can accompany them on their gender dysphoria to change their gender, but you can't give them an aspirin. They can't get a tattoo under the age of 18 without your consent, but we can make sure they can have an abortion and you don't know it. Tell me, people, am I just stupid, or is there something radically wrong? Is there a darkness? Is there a darkness that's been embraced by popular ideology? We live in a country where We have thousands and hundreds of thousands of people coming across our border. We admit to 85,000 unaccompanied minors being released in this country that we've lost. And we think a parent who goes to a school board meeting is a domestic terrorist. And we think Catholics who go to the Latin Rite Mass ought to be invaded by the FBI for possible terrorist activities. And I'm going, where do I live? You know, where is any common sense? I never was good in math, but 2 and 2 has always been 4 and always will be 4. And yet we've allowed a darkness that has completely extinguished the light of Christ in favor of personal freedoms and personal preferences. If I want to do it, I ought to be able to do it. Who are you to tell me that I can't do it? And you need to legalize it, and you need to celebrate it, and you need to pay for it. I don't get it. That's not love. You know, I need my children to know that I love them and I support them. And even though personally I'm opposed to the wedding that they're going to, or I'm opposed to, you know, their choice to change genders, they need to have my support and they need to have my love. Oh, really? Well, if they're mainlining and shooting up drugs and they're living in your house, are you going to say, you know, baby, I love you, and if that's what you want to do, I'm going to let you keep injecting because you need to know your mom and dad support you. No, I wouldn't let them do it. It may kill them if I let them live in my house and mainlining drugs. I'm not that stupid. But we're going to support and celebrate and embrace something that may kill their soul if they adopt this and if they choose this and they live, you know, this type of life. That's darkness. That's darkness in the world. You know, and when we live in a world where we understand in this highly exalted personal freedoms, we have over 5 million slaves bought and sold every year in the United States through various forms of human trafficking, 85% of whom are native-born American citizens, and we're buying and selling 5 million people. That's darkness. Who believes that I can treat a human being as a matter of profit, pleasure, or possession? That's darkness. And that's why when John comes to testify to the light, it's a light that we so badly need at this point in our world, in our country, and in our history. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment. Hi, I'm Father Jeff Baye from Closer Walk Catholic Communications. Thank you for being here today, and a special thanks for the support that you give us. First of all, your prayerful support we so desperately need, and also your financial support. We are donor-driven, and that is what keeps us on the air today. As you well know, the truth is in great demand and in very short supply, and mainstream media is not going to bring you the truth of the Gospels of our Lord Jesus Christ because that's not socially acceptable and it's not politically correct. Certainly we all realize that when this life journey's over, we don't stand before the Supreme Court, we stand before the throne of God. Therefore, with great clarity and great charity, to pronounce the truth of the gospel is important. Your prayers, your financial support enables us to do that. So we thank you, and may God bring you closer in your walk with the Lord each day. God bless you. Who are you? I'm not the Christ. So they asked him, "What are you then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He said, "No." So they said, "Who are you then, so that we can give an account to those who sent us? What do you have to say to yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying out in the desert, 'Make straight the way of the Lord.'" Hello and welcome back to Closer Walk Catholic Communications. Father Bayer, your host, and we're glad that you came back. Who are you? I'm the one crying out. Cut it out. This is not of God. This is of darkness. You know, there are many people in the media, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's in mainline television or whatever, maybe it's a podcast or whatever. There are many people who proclaim to be preaching the gospel. And I hope they are. But when we preach the gospel, we preach the truth of Christ. And we don't back away from calling evil, evil. And we don't back away from calling darkness, darkness. When John the Baptist said, "I have come to testify to the light," and I go back to that opening example. You turn the lights on in the kitchen, the roaches scramble. There are not enough people testifying to the light. How many times do we find ourselves in a situation, well, I didn't want to say anything because I'm scared they'd get upset. I'm scared it would start an argument. It wouldn't do any good. If that were the case, Christ would have never been crucified. John the Baptist would have never been beheaded. And we've seen in the world starting to persecute people of certain beliefs. That if you stand for the gospel values, you can be persecuted these days. I mentioned it earlier. My gosh, I'm entrusting my 5, 6, 7-year-old child to an education system. I have a right to know what you're teaching my child. You know, and when people said, their response was, "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't have a master's in education. I've got a master's in education." Sweetheart, let me tell you something. A lot of eggheads have masters and PhD and, don't know their elbow from their behind, okay? Just because you've got credentials in back of your name does not give you the right to take my child and fill them with any philosophy or any ideology that you deem acceptable. Every one of you who are parents, if you've been blessed by God and given a child, you've got one responsibility. Not to make sure they all have college educations, not to see if they can get more degrees and accomplish, not to see how much money they can raise, and not to see whether or not they make it to the NFL or the NBA. You've got one responsibility, and that's to stand before the throne of God and say, "I did everything that I could to work for my children's salvation. I didn't do everything I could to make sure my child always liked me. I didn't do everything I could to make sure I was popular with all the parents and let my children do what all the other. I have one responsibility, to stand before the throne of God and say, I spent my life working for my children's salvation. And anything short of that is a desecration of the gift of parenthood. And that's something that we don't understand. We just think, well, I want my kids to be like everybody else. I want my children to have the full college experience. Years ago, I was in a parish, and I was out in a little rural country parish. And the family it moved back, and this lady came to me for counseling, and she had a son, 17 years old, junior in high school, who was driving. And she said, every month I buy a gross of condoms and put it in his glove compartment in his car. She said, because I'm not ready to be a grandmother yet. I said, honey, other than water balloons, if your son is using that for what they're intended to, he's doing better than any 12 married men I know, okay? Giving a junior in high school a gross of condoms every month. Where's your responsibility as teacher? Where's your responsibility to work for your child's salvation? Now, we can preach all we want, and we know kids are going to do things, and we know they're going to make mistakes. We don't have to celebrate that. We don't have to celebrate it. Read in the news a guy, I don't know, some state, he got his 15-year-old girlfriend pregnant. So the mother and the baby daddy, planned a trip to Oregon so she could have an abortion, kind of kidnapped her for an abortion. You really think you're helping your child? Do you really think you're working for their salvation? When John the Baptist said, I've come to testify to the light, somebody needs to take a flashlight and shine on the darkness that's become so very prevalent in today's society. People completely abdicating their role. And unfortunately, not all religious leaders are willing to preach the gospel. They abdicate their roles because it's important. It's important that they're popular. It's important that they, keep these mega structures that they built. It's important they can pay all their bills and live the lifestyles they live. That's not what's important. It's really not. What's important is to testify to the light and to understand the darkness that is pervasive. And I know many of you have, I don't know what I did. I sacrificed, I scrimped and saved. I sent my children to Catholic schools. I saved for 12 years, paid tuition, and now none of them go to church. And whenever I bring it up, there's an argument. Keep bringing it up. Keep letting them know that their salvation is all that matters to you. Please let them know that being pleasing in the sight of God is what's important to you. Please let them know that the sacramental life of the church is an encounter with the living God that we can have here on earth that's different from nobody else's. Also, let them know, I'm not going to eat meat ever again on Friday. I'm going to fast on Friday from eating meat. Now, I'm not going out to have a seafood platter. I'm going to really make a sacrifice every Friday because I'm going to fast for that to pray that you return to the church. I'm going to fast from television, internet, whatever it is. Choose a fast day, one day a week. And let your children know that you're fasting for them. And your only prayer is not to live where you want to name the kids what you want them to name. Your prayer is that you return to the church and you continue to work on your salvation, because that's what's very important to me. That's what testifying to the light is in a world that's filled with darkness. And testifying to the light means that we're unafraid and unapologetic about our beliefs. We're not judgmental. Please understand. We're not called to judge and condemn people, but we are called to witness to the truth and be unapologetic about the truth as we've come to know it, as we understand what God asks of us. And I hate to say it, but sometimes we have to make that decision within the church. Sometimes we have people in the church, and I'm talking about in the Catholic Church here, who are professing things that are not, that are not testifying to the light. They're accepting the darkness and asking us to bless it. They're accepting the darkness and not calling it what it is. And we're called to live in the light, to walk in the light. And we're called to bring it to the people that we love. That can be very, very difficult over the holidays. Well, my daughter's living with her boyfriend away at college, and they want to come home for Christmas. And if they say they can't live in my, sleep in the same room in my house, then they won't come home for Christmas. Adios, Feliz Navidad. Let them understand that you're not willing to sacrifice their salvation just so that they can like you and approve of you. You're willing, you'll always love them. You want them here. You're not going to allow them to do anything that knowingly separates them from God's law and God's love. And then we testify the light by living in the light. We profess to the light by encountering the living God and going to confession and confessing our darkness, confessing our failures, confessing our sins. We have to be in the light to recognize the light and bring it to other people. Please, Catholics, come home for Christmas. You want to really have a salvation event. You want the real meaning of Christmas to come back. Go experience God's love. Go experience His mercy and forgiveness. Then you'll know that maybe the world is very materialistic about it. But for me and for your loved ones, what Christmas means is having hope and living in the light of Christ and experiencing His love and His mercy. God bless you. May the Lord keep you close to Him each day in your walk with the Lord. God bless. Hi, I'm Father Jeff Baye from Closer Walk Catholic Communications. Join us here on this station each week as we strive to bring you the gospel message with great clarity and great charity. And may God bless you in your walk each day.